I need your help. I'm looking for a car, and if you can help me get my uncle behind the wheel of this car, I will pay a reward of 1,000 Australian dollars of my own money for it. That's about 3 or 4 cents in American dollars. I get it's not a lot. It's what I have. So, with the boring part out of the way, it's time to get on the important part, which is the story behind this car. Why am I looking for it? I am looking for a 1963 Ferrari 250 GTE. It's a car that was kind of technically stolen sometime around 1977 to 1979, and it's been missing since 1990. So to tell this story, I need to go way back to 1964. My family did what everyone from Malta did, and they emigrated to Sydney. Two of the older brothers, my uncles, they went back to Malta after a few years, so I had never met them. Fast forward to this year, and through a random string of luck, my wife and I were able to go on our first international holiday together. Part of that trip included going to Malta. While I was there, I reached out to my two uncles in Malta, and I met them both. I didn't know anything about these guys when I met them, and I didn't know anything about my uncle Lino until he came to pick me up in an old Mercedes. He's 84, he's still driving a manual, and he's switched on. He's an awesome dude. It only took us a few minutes to start getting along, and it wasn't long after that we both started talking about cars. My wife says that we're clearly related, and we both had a passion for cars, so maybe it runs in the family. But it was easy for us to get along, even though it was 50 years between us. At some point, while he was driving us around, he mentioned that he used to own a Ferrari 250 GTO. So I nearly choked to death while he was driving us. But after a bit more prodding, it turned out that the car was a 250 GTE. I know everyone knows about the GTO, but there are actually a few variations of that 250 series cars. And the GTE is kind of the everyman's Ferrari for the time. As much as a V12 Ferrari can be in every man's anything anyway. Lino then hit me with the next bombshell about this car, and that was the car was taken. And you're like, what do you mean, Lino? What does that mean, taken? And he goes, oh, it's stolen. There's a bit of back and forth going on here because, English is his second language. I don't speak a scrap of Maltese, and this is the first time I've met him. But after, a couple of months and a bit of back and forth, I've got a clear enough story to be able to tell you and hopefully get you on my side to try and find this thing. So sometime around 1977 to 1979, Lino was working on oil fields in Libya. He'd left his wife at home in Malta with his kids, and she did not like this Ferrari. I've been told this by a few people. She didn't like how it sounded. She didn't like how fast Lino drove it. She didn't like that it wasn't practical because it was it was 4-seaters, but it was only a 2-door. Anyone who has owned a sports car, we've all heard this story. We get it. Too fast. We don't like you drive it. Too much attention. Whatever. Too flashy. And you've heard it from your friends or exes or partners or whatever. We've all heard this. Sometimes people just don't get your interest, whether it's cars or model trains. Anyway, apparently she was driving this car at some point and someone followed her home and offered to buy it. She didn't like the car. She was going to get rid of it, so she said yes. The car was sold for what I understand to be dirt cheap at the time. I've heard 1,000 Maltese pounds said a couple of times, which I believe was really low even at the time for a car like that. It sounds like the person who had purchased the car was aware that my auntie wasn't really able to sell the car, and he got it out of Malta immediately. So as best I can tell, it went from Malta to the UK. So here's the thing though. According to my uncle, he never knew that any of this was happening. So he came home from work and the car was gone. He made some inquiries with the police and he was redirected to Interpol when it was clear that the car had left Malta. And so far as I can tell, he is still the registered owner of the car in Malta today. My auntie was never able to sell the car because it was never hers to sell in the first place. So yeah, technically the car was stolen.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Lino never pushed at it the time. He didn't think it was possible to recover the car for one. It had left Malta by the time he got home. And, he stayed with his wife until she passed a few years ago. And I don't believe that, that he wanted any animosity between them. He cared for his wife, whether or not they agreed on cars, but he cared for his wife. So he let it go, But nearly 50 years later, he meets me. And he still cared enough about this car to tell me the story, and it makes sense. It turns out he didn't buy the car for cash. He was a builder at the time he acquired the car, and he actually did it as a full trade or a partial trade on a set of apartments he built. Instead of getting paid cash, he got the car as part of the deal. And he did a lot with that car. He drove it around Italy with his family. He'd had it resprayed from white to red, and he'd had the engine rebuilt. So he was clearly passionate about this vehicle, passionate enough to tell me about it. And I'm passionate about cars. So as soon as I got home, I started looking for it. And I mean, the first step with a car like that is you just jump on Google, you punch in the VIN, and you see what you find. And in this case, I found nothing. I reached out to a database that I came across, barchetta.cc, and they have a registry, and they had nothing on the car. The chassis number is 4819 GT, and it was just a blank page. So I sent them some details and a few photos, and they've since updated the database, but we don't know where the car is. I also reached out to a couple of the big auction houses, Haggerty, Bonhams, and Sotheby's, and oh my God, look at what they sent me. Look at this thing. It is an immaculate, fully restored Ferrari 250 GT. I got sent this car 4 times. It is stunning, and I'm over the moon at this point. The first time I saw this, I was absolutely over the moon. And then you scroll through the photos, and it's the wrong VIN. They've sent me 4189 GT instead of 4819 GT. For a moment there, I thought we'd found it, and it would have been awesome to find this specific car because people know where it is, and it's in excellent condition, but that's not the car. So, kind of at a dead end now. My goal at the moment is just to get my uncle behind the wheel of this car for a day. I've spoken with him, and because of the time that has passed, even though he is interested in seeing the car again, he isn't interested in fighting over ownership. And this is where you come in. If I'm going to have a chance of finding this car, I need help. I've done as much as I can from Australia, and though I have a few clues, it's just not enough for me to figure out where it is today. I know the VIN, 4819 GT. The last verified owner was a guy by the name of Falk Gangolf Stemia in Hanau in 1990. Apologise if I've butchered the pronunciation. And at the time, the car was listed as a 250 GTO replica. So it may not look like a 250 GT at this point in time. For a car like this to disappear for so long, I think it may have been wrecked, but I also think, and I think it's more probable, that the car was bought at some point by someone who intended to restore it, and it's probably just sitting in a garage, long forgotten and neglected. That's probably why I can't find it online, no pictures or info or anything about it on any forums. So, if you have a tip, please send it to the email in the video description below. And even more importantly, like, share, and subscribe. I need the maximum amount of engagement I can for the algorithm so that everyone knows I'm looking for this car, and somewhere out there is someone who knows where it is. Don't just do this for me or my uncle. Do this for every guy out there who's had a hobby that their partner just didn't get. If everyone who's had to sell something they loved or had something that they loved sold out from underneath them. I want to get Leno behind the wheel for a day. That's my goal. And, whether it's wrecked, forgotten, or restored, I still want to know about it. I want to be able to tell him what happened to his Ferrari, to the stolen Ferrari. I want to tell him where it is now. So please help me out. Hopefully I'll be able to give you a positive update. I'm sure someone out there in the greater world knows exactly where this car is. So we've got to get this video in front of them and fill in more of the story. So thanks. Instead of getting a proper pop filter, I have a sock with some photos of my cat on it. So very high tech setup here.